Hey, one. So this is kind of like an open letter to Franco Bifo Berardi and anyone else in his circle. I don't expect him to come across this. Maybe he will, but it's just kind of like an open letter and sort of like opening a discourse about the kind of stuff that he writes. Right now, I was talking with somebody. Now, I tend to defend Bifo a lot more than a lot of other people will. Mostly because, like, he says stupid shit that gets in the way of people understanding, I think, what he's more so trying to convey. I think a lot about the example where he said that ADHD isn't real. Like, I'm sorry, buddy, you're not going to connect with the young people by saying that. I understand you come from the history of 1970s anti-psychiatry, so you see ADHD and you're like, oh, I want to... But, like, that's not how the modern semiotic works. You got to understand the flow of our communications as well as what you experienced in order to make that, discourse really happen and make sense, But that's not really about that. I kind of see that as like a minor silly thing. I think it's stupid, but it's not like really that important. No. I want to talk about Bifo's depression. Right, now, I don't blame him for being depressed, all right? Nobody's criticizing anybody here. But what Bifo has kind of done in the last, I would say, 20 years is kind of compose, this sort of, I would say, I wouldn't say theory, but more like a discourse of depression, right? And it's this depression of this world of sadness. And it's whenever I come across his projects, I always see this, right? And again, I don't blame him for being depressed, but this is not something that works for the younger generation, right? And I'm not saying that you have to make stuff for the younger generation, but there's a reason why this message is being lost on the younger generation, because yes, we're all depressed too. But we also are the ones who have to inherit the earth. You're going to be dying in a couple decades. You're in your twilight years. But people like me, I'm in the most active time of my life. And I don't think it's necessarily helpful to say, we should, it's not just that I don't think he's wrong when in the book he wrote about Guattari, which is a great book. You should read it, right? If you like Guattari, read Bifo's book on Guattari. It will make you feel a lot of feelings. But I think he's right that you have to analyze depression. You have to have it as part of your political framework. But it seems almost as if that's all it is now. Now I'm somebody with bipolar, right? Well, but I'm bipolar, for sure. I have the ups and I have the downs. When I'm down, I can barely get out of bed. And I'm 32. There's just months where I can barely take care of myself and I need somebody else to take care of me because it gets that bad. And then in my manic phases, oh man, I got to be careful. I'll just say that. I'm always, I got to be careful because I might make mistakes that I'll regret, And with mania, it's a matter of knowing when to push on the brakes, while with depression, it's figuring out how to turn on the gas. And when you see it that way and you realize, wait a second, it's not just about positivity and constant production and blah, 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 but it's also not also about depression. You've been talking about depression for 20 fucking years, Betty. All right, I'm just going to be blunt with you. All right. And I grew up in this period, right? And I realized that in order for me to live, I have to do something that makes my life meaningful or matter. And I've gone through many depressive phases. I mean, fuck, do you know how many times I wanted to throw myself on the third rail while living in Boston? I mean, it was Boston, and it will make anybody want to throw themselves on the third rail, but more so than others, And I'm very familiar with depression and just the concept that he says that that your desires are no longer correlated with the real, right? I'm very familiar with that, but I also believe in flux, in regulation. I think the thing that most people have, forgotten the most importantly from Deleuze and Guattari is that it's not all about deterritorializing everything, and it's also not about reterritorializing everything. It's about the cycle between the two. Yes, it does result in increased deterritorialization over time, but why are we worried about something that's happening 500 years or whatever from now, when there's things going on right now that we need to figure out and solve? A philosophy of just depression does nothing for us young people who need to live in this world. We have to live in this world for potentially 50 more years. I'm not gonna just fucking bend over when my body already makes it happen without even trying. So, I thought a lot about this, I can't speak for Felix. I don't know anything about him. I was born, 7 months after he died? There's no way I could even know. I can only look into the past and make judgments, and I don't want to do that because, again, I don't know him. And, I can only judge on what, living people have said and, what people have specifically said in their own experiences with depression, which is why I'm more focused on what Bifo's saying here. And I'm definitely... I definitely believe that there was, certainly a problem in the last, decade of Felix's life. I don't know what that is, and I don't feel like it's appropriate for me to speculate what that is. But I don't think that his failure to solve that problem, especially considering that there were a lot of factors that got in the way of him being able to, figure himself out. I don't think that means that he was wrong to have that energy, because we have to have that energy or else we're all gonna die. And you got a life, you already had a life to live. We're working on it, and that's kind of hard, I think, to realize and remember. And so the way I look at it is this, a computer, a processor. You surely know about a clock cycle, right? A clock cycle is a little blast of electricity that is released through the entire board of a processor and a motherboard and all that crap. Every cycle, this little zap to trigger it, and then there's a soft period that nothing happens, right? And this happens trillions of times a second, right? We can look at the energized state as a manic state, and we can look at the off state as a depressed state. There's no energy versus there's high energy. The problem with capitalism is it's trying to make everything a flat fucking line, but not even computers work that way. Everything works through on and off cycles that allows for the deterritorialization and reterritorialization of, structure. That's what allows a computer to have memory, or even abstract structures represented in that memory. It's what produces the surface of that. And I think it's important to take that, into not just a political perspective or an artistic perspective or a media perspective, but a life perspective. It's really sad that, Felix wasn't able to figure himself out, and I think about that a lot. And maybe that will be my fate too. But right now, I gotta focus on living. I gotta focus on what I gotta do to keep me and my spirit alive. So, I just wish that this specter of depression would be lifted and replaced more with a machine of bipolar, an acceptance of mania, but an acceptance of depression too. Maybe Felix was bipolar, and maybe that's what we were experiencing. Maybe that's why he was so energized. I don't know. I always kind of that's kind of like my fan theory, if you want to call it that. But I mean, again, I never met the guy, so I don't know. But if that is the case, then maybe that's the way we should think about things. Things in modulation, things on and off cycles, things of constant transformation, of movement, of change. So, that's just my opinion on things. I've thought about this a lot. I've wanted to say something for a while, but I never got around to it, so...